Roman, 11, from King's College School, and I'm the co-chair of the Cambridge Schools Eco-Councillor. It can be difficult to be locked down at home during a time of fear and uncertainty, especially for kids. Cambridge Schools Eco-Council is organising a mini-series of free 60-minute online eco-seminars to raise awareness of key sustainability challenges and solutions. While schools have been forced online in many countries, children, students, family members, and members of the public can register for free over Eventbrite and participate online over Zoom from 4 to 5 p.m. UK time each fortnight, from Tuesday the 21st of April to Tuesday the 16th of June. Each online eco-seminar focuses on a key sustainable development goal, such as climate action, SDG 13, protecting and restoring life on land, SDG 15, or agricultural and food systems, SDG 2. Each online eco-seminar includes students and expert speakers. Over Zoom, after 15 minutes for tech testing and interactions from 3:45 to 4 p.m., student eco-councillors and UN Voices of Future Generations child authors / ambassadors, together with world-class experts, will provide a 25-minute introduction to a sustainability challenge and discuss creative, local, and solutions. For a future 25 minutes, participants can ask questions and discuss potential solutions and ways to raise their education and awareness interactively, followed by a 10-minute closing from the experts and youth speakers by 5 p.m. For our very first online eco-seminar, we are here to discuss global climate change, the Paris Agreement, and policy solutions with international legal expert Professor Christine Voigt and Councillor Rosie Moore, and 2 youth speakers, Jona David and Virginia Denmead, just before Earth Day 2020.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Christina Voigt. I'm very thrilled to be attending that seminar, and I'm very much impressed and enthusiastic by hearing the wonderful presentations by the students and the organizers. My name is Christina Voigt. As I said, I'm a professor of law at the University of Oslo in Norway, and I have been working with legal issues with regard to climate change for many years, for almost 20 years. I wrote my PhD thesis on it, and I teach my students at the university a lot about climate change law. But for the last 10 years, I've also been a negotiator for the Norwegian government. I participated in the United Nations climate negotiations, amongst other things, on the Paris Agreement. So I've seen how it came about, and I've been involved in the process when it was adopted. And this is also why I would like to talk about the Paris Agreement in my brief intervention here. I'd like to say a little bit why it is important and why, or what it tells us to do, and maybe what we can also take as personal messages as individuals from the Paris Agreement. So let me start by explaining why the Paris Agreement is so important. Well, the Paris Agreement is an agreement between states. It is not between individuals or people or companies. It is only an agreement between states. And that makes it extremely relevant and extremely important, first of all, because through this agreement, states, and currently there are 187 member states to the Paris Agreement, they recognized how serious a threat climate change is. This is not a given because there are always differences in opinion between different states, but through that agreement, they all came to the same conclusion that climate change is a threat that urgently needs to be addressed. The second one is that all states have to work together. They only can solve it together. This is something that is often referred to as a collective action problem, which means that many activities have caused the problem by many states, by many actors, and it also needs the actions by many actors in order to address the problem. So it is caused by many, but it can also only be solved by the collective action of many, many states. And this is what the Paris Agreement does. It brings together all these many states in a collective action. The third aspect is that the Paris Agreement recognizes the differences between states, because those 187 states are all very different. We have big states like the United States or China or Canada, and we have tiny little island states like Tuvalu or Kiribati in the South Pacific. So they're very, very different states, but they're all brought together in that global fight against climate change. And that agreement recognizes that everyone is different and every state can bring in and has to bring in its own national circumstances, its own conditions as it faces it at home. The fourth aspect why the Paris Agreement is so important is that states have pledged to be open with each other, to be transparent with each other, to show each other what they're gonna do, how they're gonna do it in terms of climate change. They have to communicate what is called nationally determined contributions. These are national plans that each state has to have in place, and they have to report on how well they're doing in implementing those plans and in achieving them. That is very important, because then the whole world can see how states are doing. And that, when I say the whole world, I really mean the whole world. It is not only states between each other, but everyone, like you and me, because these reports will be published on a website, on a public website, so that everybody gets information of who is doing what and how well. And then, of course, that is open to criticism, that is open to praise, but it's also something where we individually can push the level of ambition that states are putting into their climate plans. And the fifth aspect why the agreement is so important is that it tells everyone, its member states, but also every politician, any policymaker, researcher, student, everyone, what we need to do and how quickly. Because it says, and it's based on science provided by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it says that it tries to or it aims to limit global warming to somewhere well below 2 degrees centigrade increase. This is compared to how warm the world was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. That is a very difficult task, and it tells us that in order to reach that task, by the middle of this century, by 2050, which is only about 30 years from now, not a long time, the world has to reduce, like everyone has to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to net zero. This is an interesting concept, like what is net zero? But it means that not all greenhouse gas emissions can be reduced to zero, to zip nada, because some emissions happen naturally, some emissions can just not be reduced to nothing. But those that cannot be reduced, they have to be balanced by what is called increased removals. Removals happen by sequestration through plants, for example, to forests or in soils. So everything that cannot be reduced to zero has to be balanced out by increased removals, so that by the end of the day, the sum is zero. No more emissions that go into the atmosphere. And that is referred to as net zero, and this is what the Paris Agreement has put the world to do, and the IPCC, the scientific panel, has just make it more concrete of how exactly, or how much that actually means. And even further, beyond 2050, beyond or after the middle of the century, the overall sum of emissions, of greenhouse gas emissions, has actually to be negative, so less than zero, which means that we have to remove greenhouse gas emissions out of the air and store them away so that the sum is negative. So this is an enormous task. That's something the whole world needs to work on together in order to stand a chance to reach that goal. And then finally, what can we all as individuals do about it? Well, the agreement tells us pretty much that climate change as a really significant challenge needs an all hands on board approach, which means that everybody has to do their bit or has to do their fair share. If it's in states or companies or individuals, we can only stand a chance to reach that global target of keeping temperature increases to well below 2 degrees if everybody is on board. Now, this is of course related very closely to the energy sector, because energy worldwide is the sector that emits most greenhouse gas emissions, because most energy today is still produced by burning fossil fuels, by burning coal and gas and oil in power plants, and then we produce energy. So one important, maybe the most important step that the world and everybody and all decision makers can do is to switch to renewable energy sources that, for example, come from the sun or wind or bioenergy, just not burning fossil fuels and emitting greenhouse gas emissions. So switching to renewable energy is one or the most important measure that we can try to achieve, and that can be done locally, that can be done nationally, that can be done citywide. For example, in Cambridge, there are initiatives to increase the share of renewable energy. That's very important. The second one is just trying to use less energy. You know, we don't need to do everything by use of electrical power. There are many things that we can do where we can reduce our consumption of energy, and that also helps quite a bit on the way. And the third aspect, of course, is to try, if we have to use energy, and of course we have to use energy all the time, we have to try to do it more efficiently. So we do more with less energy. Another aspect that we can do is to increase removals. I talked about removals, remember, to balance out all these emissions that cannot be reduced to zero. And one way to increase removals of greenhouse gas emissions is by protecting forests, conserving forests, and increasing the areas where we actually have forests by planting trees, by planting forests. That can be something we can do in our garden or in parks, but it's something that is very important as a means to get to net zero, as I already tried to explain. And a third aspect that I wanted to mention is when we buy things, we need to be conscious about where it comes from, because there are a lot of products that we consume that are produced in other parts of the world. And in those parts of the world, maybe there are not very good regulations or rules on how to use energy efficiently or to use more renewable energy. It's just cheaper to produce it there because there are not these laws. And in addition, if these things that we consume are produced somewhere else in the world, they usually are shipped or transported to us by, you know, huge container ships or planes, which again produce a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So trying to switch to locally produced food and other products is a very efficient and very wise way to reduce our climate impact. That is actually all I wanted to say. Just to round it up, science tells us, and the Paris Agreement tells us, that it's an enormous challenge, but it's a challenge we just have to tackle because the consequences are so much more dire and difficult to deal with, and much more expensive than dealing with the causes.